Onora tra I ladri, honor among thieves. Il mio nome è Salvatore Miguel Vincenzo de Martelli e questo è il mio racconto. As I sat silently in the passenger seat of the car I usually drove, I knew what Tessio must have felt on his last long ride. In a situation like this, even a 5-minute ride was long. The man beside me, trusted compatriot, friend, and my executioner, didn't speak. His mind was probably full of many of the same thoughts mine was. Come diavolo casi si arriva a questo? I mulled that over for a moment. To be honest, I'd been greedy. I'd tried to take what was not mine to have. I tried to out-business the business, and when that didn't work, I tried to kill my boss. I thought about everything as the scenery went by unnoticed. I didn't count the turns we made. I didn't glance in the mirrors, as was my usual habit from being a driver for so long. I simply stared out the window and stroked the small prayer card that lay in my hand. St. Christopher was my family saint. He'd always helped us. But this time I knew my prayers were falling on deaf ears. I'd made a promise on another saint, the one I'd failed to keep. I had been subjected to fire and blood, as the saying went. I'd been a made man in the Familia De Marco. When I'd first gotten out, I felt like it was my right to have a place. I'd done my time. But I had a romantic, over-dramatized picture of our thing in my head from too many long nights reading The Godfather. Ironically, one of the few books in Ains that didn't suck or wasn't censored. We turned again, and I focused on the driver this time. There were more things about him I couldn't figure out. Men respected him as much as they feared him, and yet he had never so much as raised his voice to me in anger, and not just because I was his godson. He was a strange man, Italian enough to be made, but old enough to have lived a life before the family. Matthew D'Ambrosi, or as I knew him, Uncle Matt, was a legend. People told stories about him that made even those of us in the family pale. He was, they said, ruthless, heartless, and willing to do almost anything unless you earned the right to ask a favor of him, and he could speak volumes without ever saying a word. His dark glasses still hid his eyes, and for a moment I wondered what I would see when he took them off. Would it be that cold, smoking rage he was so well known for? Or would it be that sad, almost melancholy rage that left him sobbing? Was I still a friend? I sighed and looked out the window again. Gio, no, I didn't deserve to call him that any more. Don DeMarco had always taught us to take our punishments. This was mine. I couldn't let myself run for it. I wouldn't let my surname become a curse again, even if it meant my life, my blood. I looked down at my hands. When had they become the hands of a killer? I knew the score. 25 members of my crew, friends, associates, earners, were dead or in jail. I'd killed a couple of them myself. I didn't consider the cost when I made the decision, and now I had to. I had single-handedly upset the fragile balance of power in the city, and only this could prevent another all-out war. I was lost in thought, and so, even though I saw the buildings and the sunrise, it took me almost 15 minutes to notice that we were driving in aimless circles, wasting time, neither of us wanting to get out of the car. When I did notice that a 5-minute ride had turned into 20, I wondered at D'Ambrosi's hesitation. I didn't know if I could still call him Uncle Matt, but the words Mr. D'Ambrosi seemed strange to me. Something else was strange. The man I'd once earned the right to call Matt was not known for hesitation. With him, an order was given, it was done. Friend, foe, it didn't matter. He did it. This time when I looked around, I did notice things, but the little things I usually paid no attention to were suddenly in focus. The crispness of the air, the bright orange red of the sun rising on a beautiful new day, the sound of the wind playing hide-and-seek around the skyscrapers. All the things seemed new to me, and I think that was when I finally accepted the fact that I was going to die. I even indulged in my one bad habit. I lit up and took a drag. The window obediently slid down a fraction of an inch to let the smoke out. The normally jovial man who sat beside me hadn't said a word since he picked me up at my place. D'Ambrosi was often talkative and generally very convivial with the staff. And I still remembered the day I had walked into his office, clutching a business card, my pass into the house, and asked him to speak to the Don on my behalf. After all, I reminded him, I was his godson, as good as family. That had been, 7 years ago? Vincenzo. I remembered looking up at him from the chair across from his desk where I'd seated myself without permission. I will do this for you, but my word only goes so far, and if you screw up I may not be able to save you. You do this and I may not be able to be Uncle Matt anymore. I remembered nodding, thinking I understood. I hadn't known anything then. But I had nodded and said to him, I know the value of words. He'd simply nodded, risen, and walked towards the Don's office. Be polite, be respectful, never turn your back to leave unless you've been dismissed. He smiled. And Vince, welcome to La Famiglia DeMarco. And with that I was ushered in to meet Gio DeMarco. The black sedan finally rolled to a stop, neither one of us wanting to play out the tableau we both knew was coming. The silence settled a moment, and I cast a sideways glance at him to find him studying me from behind his black glasses. He slid the glasses down a mere inch or so, just enough so I could get a hint of jade eyes they hid. But they were more emerald green than jade, with worry. Genuine concern crinkled his normally passive face as he looked me over again. He scanned me from top to bottom, his eyes resting on the prayer card in my lap for a moment before he turned away, pretending to be uninterested. He was wearing that passive and blank look that made people say he had no soul, but I could see him fighting to maintain that act. He spoke quietly, pointing to my black and blue hand. How is it? I tried to wiggle my fingers and grimaced. Madone, it hurts. I didn't stop to ask the pardon of the Virgin for using her name like that. It hurt too much. Do me a favor. I allowed myself to forget for a moment this man was going to kill me. Remember to break his hand, too. Uncle Matt smiled. His familiar face relaxed into the same lines I'd known forever. And for a moment he was just my friend. The man I'd called Uncle for so many years. Not the man who was going to end my life. Don't worry. I will. I allowed myself to smile. I knew that Tony, the house guard who'd broken my hand, was in for a lot of trouble. Uncle Matt wouldn't kill him, but he'd pay him back for the broken hand. Tony had claimed I was resisting. I wasn't. He was just pissed I'd betrayed the family and wanted an excuse to hit me. Not that I blamed him at all. I probably would have done the same in his position. I was his crew boss. He was muscle, content to do the heavy lifting, and leave me to run things. I smiled a little in appreciation of a job well done. Tony was a hard hitter, and even when he was teaching a lesson he didn't pull his blows. My smile faded, though, as the image of his dark eyes blazing with anger came back to me. He'd stood over me, kicking and hitting me, cursing. I remember him screaming at me in Italian, "Stavi dando sempre patria de la famiglia, quando altri devono amer per te." Betrayal. The word hit like a knife in the ribs. I could still remember the look on Don DeMarco's face when he'd called me in for the talk. I'd known I was in the shit when he called for me to close the door, and had Uncle Matt stand outside. He wanted to speak to him alone. I figured it was so Uncle Matt couldn't plead for my life, and I would have argued if he'd tried. I'd stepped into the office. I didn't even try to sit, since Gio didn't offer me a chair. I knew better now. My eyes had been immediately drawn to the pistol on his desk. It was mine. I'd used it to kill a couple of people without permission, and the cops had politely returned it to him. I stood there, trying not to shake myself to pieces as I calmly told my Don what I had told my uncle the previous day. I told him of the men I'd killed, the men I'd gotten arrested, the ones I'd framed. I told him everything. I knew there was no use hiding. My crimes were about to become public knowledge in the family, so I'd come to him in private. We both knew I was guilty, and we both knew what had to be done. I'd gone against his order. When I'd finished, he simply shook his head and hit the call button to alert Uncle Matt he was ready for it. I'd never seen Uncle Matt look so old, but as he came in, he seemed to have aged 10 years. He met his Don's eyes, and I could see his jaw tighten. As Don DeMarco shook his head silently, Gio's eyes never left my face as he spoke softly in Italian. "Take care of it." He looked over at Uncle Matt before he spoke the last word, quietly. I'd taken something for the pain Uncle Matt had insisted, and after a long argument I'd finally agreed. I took enough to take the edge off, but not really enough to kill the pain. In my mind, the pain was part of my penance. But I still knew what was coming. Here and after. Posso pensare all'inferno, se mi tradere I miei amici della famiglia. Gio had tried to give me a pass, but we both knew he couldn't. He would lose respect, and there would always be that nagging fear in the back of his mind that I would try it again. I was too good of a Catholic to kill myself, so instead I settled for silently cursing myself as I waited to die. "Tell Gio it wasn't personal," I said, around the lump in my throat. "It was never personal. I have a lot of respect for Don DeMarco." He sat forward, a gesture of impatience. I had pushed too hard, too far. He wanted me out of the car. I'd reminded him of that betrayal. I could read it on his face. He was too angry to help me out of the car. He wanted me to flounder with my broken hand for a few minutes, but he wasn't quite angry enough to pull me out and shoot me here. No, he wanted me to choose to get out. And in some small way that made me fear and respect him even more. Fear because I knew just how vicious this man could be. I'd driven him to places where business and men were taken care of. I'd even helped on a few. I knew just how vicious he could be, and yet he still trusted me not to run. And he gave me that trust for the simple fact that I'd given my word. I could almost put myself in his place. I would have dragged the person kicking and screaming out of the car and wasted them right there. I could see that cold anger D'Ambrosi was known for, the type that could stew for years before he found an opening to put a knife in your back for betrayal. To him that was not a venial sin, but a mortal one. I'd reached for the door handle first, without thinking, with my right hand, and then a moment later with my left. I shot a glance at D'Ambrosi, who hadn't moved an inch to help me. His gaze was still forward, and I knew I could run. Where would I go? My right hand, the one I used for everything, was broken, badly broken. My ribs were cracked, and the Don had my license and gun in his desk. No one was ever supposed to find me. I was just supposed to disappear. Uncle Matt had claimed he dropped me off somewhere and produced a witness that saw me get on the train. That was still the story we told outsiders about my father, that he got on the train. Of course, all of us knew the truth. Father, forgive me. I leaned on the car. The window between us made me feel only slightly safer. I knew he could and would kill me, and I wondered how I would be able to do it. How I'd be able to face down the man who had cared for me and protected me most of my life. Uncle Matt's window was down an inch to let the smoke out, so I heard his words clearly, and for a moment I contemplated not answering, but I had to say something. This was my godfather, the man who'd been my legal guardian since my father died when I was 15. There was silence a moment before he asked a second time, "What happened?" Those two words pled for some sort of explanation, Why such a good boy would kill his own men. I looked down at my hands. The first two were justified. They shot at me first. But what about Sammy? I remembered the little snitch. He'd threatened to go to D'Ambrosi. I panicked and shot him. I remembered the Sargassi brothers. I'd paid for them to be arrested. They were going to be cooling their heels in the stir for a long while. Then there was Joey Dice DeLuca. I throttled him after I got the information I wanted. Things had just gone down from there. Started as blood, man. That's all I could say. I'd found those sons of bitches, and then I didn't know what else to say. How do you explain when you stop thinking and just kill? I shrugged. It got complicated. I finished lamely. D'Ambrosi looked up at me. I guess he was thinking the same thing. I had made a power play. I tried to take over the family when my boss showed what I believed to be a weakness. I was a traitor. Tell Gio I went willingly, I repeated. His head bowed as he nodded again. He didn't speak any further, and I was glad. I knew anything else he had to say would only make this harder on both of us. It was always hard to read him, because of those damn glasses. They hid his eyes from the world. For as long as I'd known him, Mr. D'Ambrosi had worn those glasses. Everyone knew them. They were his calling card, his mark of favor, and his mark of disfavor also.